I love to always kind of situate us when we start a practice, like situate where I am, situate where you are, and um, remembering our connection to the world around us. Not something that we always remember so much in modern society, but that's actually very related to receptive mindfulness. It's about being embodied and being embedded in the world, in this world, in this moment, and receiving the world through our senses. So I wanted to say a few words about active and receptive mindfulness before the meditation to give us something to practice with that is directly related to our subject matter. And so there's different ways you could say that our mind can pay attention or be aware. And one way is it's kind of, it's active. There's a, you could say there's a goal or an initiatory move towards something. It could even be we hear a sound and then we kind of avert to the sound, right? We move towards that sound. The breath, we might kind of move towards the breath. It has this active quality. And then there's a more receptive quality to mindfulness, which is receiving the experience that is happening. So receiving the sound, receiving the sensations of breathing, receiving the feeling of loneliness. And most of us here in the West, I think we have a tendency to do a lot of the active kind of directive doing kind of energy in our meditation. And sometimes we don't have quite enough balance for the receiving and being part of meditation. And especially at the beginning, when we're beginners, we need more of that active, you know, we're trying to just get things under some kind of semblance of control so that we can see what's happening, right? But as we meditate more and more years, we actually move more and more into this mode that receives experience and lets experience teach us about life. So we receive our sense experience and let it teach us about life. So the active's more from the mind, and the receptive is more from the heart and the body and feeling. So there's doing and feeling, there's doing and being, there's a mind, and then there's a heart. So in the meditation today, I'm going to encourage you to experiment. Notice these two different energies within your practice. In the end, they do come into some kind of balance. I mean, we can put them together. It's sometimes called aiming and sustaining. Those of you who studied with monastics might be more familiar with these words, but we aim the mind and we sustain it, is how they put it. I put it connecting and receiving. So we connect with what's happening and then we receive it. But as I said, in the beginning, more aiming, more like pointing towards something. And then over time, more receiving and settling back into. Does it make sense? Am I making sense to you guys? More or less? Okay. We can just practice with it. And then afterwards, there'll be a chance, if you want, to share in the chat anything you learned by kind of focusing more on this receptive way of being mindful. Anything you learned about life, about mindfulness, about your tendencies of mind. Just want to make sure everybody's muted, right? Just don't forget to mute for the sitting, for sure. Okay, we will settle in together then. If you want, taking a couple of deep breaths to help us land, feeling the room or the place where we're seated. Feeling our home in our meditation seat. Maybe even noticing the soundscape, the sounds coming and going around us, part of our world right now. Letting the attention start to settle down from the mind, the head space, down through the body. We might invite ease and relaxation as we scan down, perhaps allowing the forehead to widen. It gets scrunched sometimes, just letting it smooth out, widening. And letting the eyes relax. They don't need to be active right now. They can relax, settle back. And the jaw perhaps too. Just loosen if it wants to, drop a bit. And the neck, we can allow it to relax by lengthening a bit, perhaps tucking the chin just a little bit. Sometimes you can feel the neck lengthen, and it likes that. It's how it relaxes. Letting the shoulders widen. That's how they relax, by dropping and broadening. And the chest and the abdomen, inviting them to soften. Feeling the contact with the cushion or chair, floor. Letting the lower back relax towards the floor. And then some of you might have a home base that you return to, that you rest your attention with. So you can connect with that experience and then receive it, allow it to come to you. So allowing the breath to come to you, allowing the sensations in the hands to come to you. So connect and receive. And some of you might have a more open practice where there isn't that conscious intention to connect. There's just the receiving each moment, the sense experience of the moment. So the connection is less, the connecting part is less obvious, and the receiving part can be more prominent. And even if you are anchoring with a home base experience, other experiences will arise, and you can receive them. Receive, allow, experience, and then go back to your home base. So you might just be curious, what is this experience when my attention is very active or the mindfulness is very active? And what is the experience when it's receptive? What's the difference? Just dropping that question, no need to think about it. Just settling back and letting sense experience touch us, you could say, or let ourselves be touched by this connection with the wild world. And so we'll practice for a while in silence. What's it like to receive the sensations of breathing, receive a sound, receive sensations in the body, receive an emotion, receive a thought? What's it like to let ourselves be touched by the myriad experiences of being alive? We'll end our meditation today by receiving the sound of the bell. I am aware that the sound of the bell isn't as pretty as it could be. Somehow, when I changed Zoom a while ago, it took away enable original sound, which makes the bell sound better. But it doesn't matter, right? We just receive the sound as it is.
Good morning again, everybody. And I just wanted to introduce our teacher for today's talk. Rebecca Bradshaw is guiding teacher emeritus of the Insight Meditation Society and the Insight Meditation Center of Pioneer Valley in East Hampton, Massachusetts. She's been practicing Buddhist Vipassana meditation since 1983 in the United States and Myanmar, or Burma, and she has been teaching since 1993. She completed her Dharma teacher training at Insight Meditation Society in Barre, Massachusetts, where she is part of the 3-month retreat teacher team and leads retreats for young adults. She also teaches at other locations in the United States and abroad, including Spanish language retreats. Rebecca has a master's degree in counseling psychology and is a licensed mental health counselor with the designation LMHC. You can look for her upcoming book, Down to Earth Dharma, to be published in the fall of this year by Shambhala Publications. Now, before I turn it over to Rebecca, I just want to say a few words about dana, which is the Pali word meaning generosity. Rebecca, like many teachers in this tradition, does not get paid for events such as these. She shares the Buddhist Dharma out of her generosity, and she, in turn, is supported by the generosity of the community. This dana practice of giving and receiving is how Buddhist teachings have been handed down for more than 2,500 years. And if you'd like to continue that tradition by supporting Rebecca, you can send dana to her electronically, and we'll put those links in the chat a couple of different times during the event. There are also non-monetary ways to practice generosity. For example, you could share a reflection during the discussion period, or you could volunteer your time with Insight San Diego. If you're interested in volunteering, please visit insightsd.org/volunteer. As a reminder, please keep your microphone muted throughout the event, unless you're asking a question or making a comment during the discussion period. Also, the talk and discussion will be recorded. So if you prefer not to be on that recording, you can ask a question via the chat, or you can turn your camera off. Now, in one final bit of housekeeping, we'd like to know how you found out about this talk, which will help us in our efforts to publicize events. So if you learned about this talk in some way other than our email, newsletter, or our website, please let us know by typing it into the chat. Maybe it's Facebook or Instagram, for example. And please direct those comments to me, Kason Lane, so as not to conflict with the other comments in the chat. So thank you for that. And now I'll turn the floor back to Rebecca to take it from here.
Let's see which order here. I think let's start with the chat responses. These were really great. So the first one, receiving gravity softly becomes tranquility. Yes, I think that receptive mindfulness is closely related to tranquility, to a quieting of the busyness of our being. And the next one, similar, feels like it has a lot to do with relaxation, especially the brain, right? So with active mindfulness, you could say we're somewhat busy, we're doing something, and the brain has that feeling of being busy doing something. But with receptive mindfulness, we're actually receiving with our whole body. You could say that we're not centering everything in the brain and the head, but actually allowing this whole being to be in direct communication with the world as it manifests around within us. Even the distinction between the outside and the inside becomes more blurred with this kind of receptive mindfulness. With the active mindfulness, we are doing something, but with the receptive mindfulness, we're being touched by the world. And so the boundary is not so defined. Lately in my practice, I've been scanning the body to identify sensations to lean into, especially the unpleasant ones, as a way of building capacity for my experience. This morning, I didn't do that. I instead just allowed, received whatever was happening. It was freeing. Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. I think that receptive mindfulness is closely related to freedom. You could even say that a feeling of freedom is wholly receptive. That there's no, this is okay, that's not, I want this, I don't want that. Like all of these ways that we meddle with reality or try to control it or manage it. I want, I don't want, I gotta have, can't have this, not okay, okay. All of that is the ways that we bind ourselves up, actually. And the active mindfulness sometimes like hides all these ways that we bind ourselves up. But when we settle back and receive experience, not picking and choosing, as this person, as Kaysen said, I just allowed, received whatever was happening. There's much more freedom. The doing feels more in the head and receptive awareness more in the body. Yep. We've already talked about that a little bit. Being receptive fosters a warm feeling of connectedness with the world. Yes. So with receptive mindfulness, we feel our embeddedness, you could say, or our interconnectedness with life. It's back to that, like the softening of the boundaries, as I was saying earlier. And the warm feeling, I like that. Fosters a warm feeling. I think it helps us have the sense that we belong, in this world. I think the deepest practice is actually a complete sense of belonging in the world. I know you don't usually hear it stated that way, that, some might even feel like that's a little heretical, but when we're fully belonging in the world, we're actually not creating the barrier of self that separates us from the world. So we're learning how to relax into the world, be of the world, interconnected. Yeah. Challenge to differentiate between the two. Yes, sometimes this is something that I hear about. And I wonder if sometimes the challenge of differentiating between the two, it comes right out of the trying to differentiate between the two. Because, right, if we're trying to differentiate, if we're trying, the receptive has already passed us by, right? We're active, we're trying to figure it out. And so it really is a kind of relaxation is the way that we can begin to understand the difference, is by relaxing into our experience, or even you could say leaning back a little bit. The active leans forward, the receptive settles back. So we can practice settling back. Most of us were not really good at doing that. I'll get into that more later, but it's more vulnerable. And we like to be in control. We like to micromanage this world, all of us. It's a human thing. And the active mindfulness has to do with this like management, right? And this gives us kind of a sense that we have a grip on things. And when we settle back, let ourselves be touched, while it has all the beautiful feelings of warmth and interconnectedness and relaxation, it also is more vulnerable. Realizing our intimate interconnectedness with this world is vulnerable. And so we have trepidation about that. All of us. We're not, we kind of want to be touched by life, but we kind of want to be able to control it at the same time. And yeah, that's our human predicament, right? In some ways, like all the dharmas in there, like the ways that we shield the heart through wanting, not wanting, spacing out, all of that. And increasing our capacity, as was mentioned earlier, increasing our capacity to be touched by life. Receiving the breath while breathing in and letting go with the out breath, connecting with the flow. Yeah, flow. Flow's a great word when we're talking about receptive mindfulness. I think here maybe talking about the flow of the breath, but what about just the flow of experience, the flow of life, the flow of these moments of sense contact, sense experience in this world, expansion. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the last chat on this subject was experiencing receptive mindfulness as expansion. Because when we get too active, too active in without the receptivity, then we start trying to manage things, and then that gets kind of confined in here. There's a sense of contraction or stress, right? And so then when we lean back and receive, that can expand. And then another one that just came in, experiencing receptive mindfulness as the absence of judging. Beautiful, right? There's that sense again. See, the thing about active mindfulness, when we're actively directing our experience, sometimes that's very useful. Like if you have an emotion and it's overwhelming you, you might, receptive mindfulness, it might not be the time for that. It might be time to like figure out how you're going to manage this emotion, either get out of it or be mindful of it in a very directive kind of way. So active, using our active mindfulness, active attention is very helpful. However, we want to have some options, right? So what I was going to say is that, but sometimes in all that activity, what hides, it hides the wanting and the not wanting. It can hide the grasping and the aversion. We think we're just doing things that are skillful, but we're actually underneath trying to get rid of the experience or make it stay. Those are the two most common activities, but we're It's hidden that we don't like it, or we like it, we want it, or we don't want it. And with the receptive, so there can be a judgment in there, right? But with a receptive mindfulness, yeah, where's the judgment? Where's it's harder for craving and aversion to hide. We would see it more clearly if it starts to show up when we're being receptive. It's more obvious. That's what actually one of the real benefits of receptive mindfulness is, to see more clearly when we tip into greed or aversion. Those two very basic roots of suffering. Okay, I think before I go on more, which I could do, let's play around with our 2 pieces of food. Did you bring your 2 pieces of food? You can turn sideways if you're embarrassed to eat in front of the camera, or whatever you need to do. So we're gonna eat these 2 pieces in kind of different modes. So take one of your pieces. Now you know what this is, right? You know what it's called. It has a name. Yeah. And so eat it. You're just going to eat it, knowing what it's called, trying to be aware of the taste as you eat it. All right. So directing towards tasting this thing, this whatever it's called. So I can tell that all of you are experienced students, because many of you, I could just see by your faces that you already moved into receptive mindfulness. But if you didn't, or even if you did, we're going to try the second piece. And this time, pretend you don't know what it is. Like, you don't know what this thing is. You've never eaten it before, even though you just had one. But with that attitude, I don't know what this is. I don't know how it's going to taste. And letting the taste come to you rather than going to it. Letting it be received by those taste buds. Okay, I have another experiment if you're interested. So choose something in your environment around you. I'm sorry, I hurried some of you along. So choose something in your environment that's pleasant to look at, a picture, a flower, or something around you, anything. And just take a minute to look at it, and kind of maybe like you'd normally look at it. You know what it is, right? It's a plant or a picture. Just noticing that experience of looking at it. Okay, so now I want you to see if you can soften your gaze, soften your eyes, and see if you can receive the experience of seeing with a very soft gaze. Don't try too hard, but just play around with it. What's it like to see this same thing with a softer gaze and not so sure what it is, letting it come to you, letting it float free of your ideas. Softening, just softening the gaze. Okay. So one way we can talk about this receptive mindfulness is of the experience of softening. Yeah, it's please feel free to put in the chat any response you have, or you can wave your hand too if you want. It seems to share its history. Huh, that's beautiful. So something more, it gets fuller is what I'm hearing, Dave. Dave, what you wrote, that the experience somehow gets fuller. I hope that's a correct interpretation. Yes, it was. Okay. Yeah, in either experience, the tasting or the seeing, and what changes when we have that more receptive mindfulness? I can see so much more detail. Yes, very important. I noticed that myself too. So I was looking at this bouquet of flowers. So I looked at it kind of directly. And then when I looked at it with a softer mindfulness, I started to notice different parts of it, like that weren't like the bigger things, but the smaller things. And it did, you know, like I saw more detail, right? So there's a way with when our mindfulness is very active that we kind of see what we want to see. And when we're more receptive, the bigger picture is allowed to touch us. It's not so selective, right? It's not so judgmental. It's a little more alive. One of the main, and I'm going to get to those chats, I saw them coming, but one of the main benefits of this more receptive mindfulness is that it makes the three characteristics of reality clearer. So most of you know impermanence, dukkha, and not self, right? So kind of the seeing more detail, the flow that was talked about before. Things become more alive when we receive them, and alive means changing. It's not so, you know, when you're looking at an object that might not be so obvious, but when you were tasting, for example, the food with more receptive mindfulness, it's possible that you noticed a lot more flavor coming and going. It just impermanence. So the purpose of active mindfulness is actually to fixate things, so you know what to do with them. So to freeze things, you could say, to conceptualize them. Notice how I kept saying, know what you're looking at when I was doing the active mindfulness. Conceptualize things so that we can manage them and use them. And receptive mindfulness, you could say, unfreezes things, which is the deeper, truer nature of reality, impermanence, anicca. Let's see some of the other ones. Whoops. More nuance and subtlety, right? So that's related to this. Things become more alive with receptive mindfulness. They become more alive, more changing, more vibrant. Perception seems to get in the way a little. As soon as I identify what it is, it's hard to receive. Exactly. perception's job is to fixate things. I mean, it's not its initial job, but its job carried on is to fixate things. So perception comes in and says, oh, I know what that is. And in some ways with receptive mindfulness, we're focusing on the I know what that is. It's so whatever we look at might just be color, form, shape, but then we're like, oh yeah, that's a painting. And then we don't receive it as much anymore. That's how perception works. It identifies something, names it, and then it quits paying attention for the most part. And this is how our minds love to work, because they don't want to work too hard. Our minds are, I mean, you could say wisely lazy. I mean, every time I come up to a door, if I have to figure out what it is, that would be a lot of extra work. So I come up to, oh yeah, that's a door. I know it's a door and I know what to do with doors. Open the handle and go through the door. So the fact that the mind has this tendency to conceptualize and name and quit paying attention is very useful. However, it glasses over the deeper truths of life, which we're trying to point towards in Vipassana meditation. The deeper truths of impermanence, dukkha, and not self. So we do talk about perception in this whole unfolding. In the eating, I found my mind narrating, but in the receptive eating, the concepts and words got dropped. Right. Beautiful. We love to think. We love thinking because it makes us feel in control, like I said before. And so receptive meditation a lot is about learning how to kind of, I call it drop the cognitive grip. You know how thinking can feel like it's just it's like gripping the mind, right? It's like, can I relax that a little bit? Settle back and let life be a mystery. Let life show me how it is. And yet, of course, the tendency to think comes back in. That's not bad. It's not wrong. It's how we are as humans. It's useful. And yet we're kind of trying to broaden the ways we can relate to this world. We primarily relate to the world, especially in modern Western culture, through thinking, through the mind. And we're trying to see if it's possible to keep that capacity, good capacity, but to expand it to a way of knowing that's more embodied, feeling, intuitive. It's a whole other realm. And I would say that meditation unfolds in that realm. We have the concepts and the intellectual understanding, and it's all helpful, gives us, some structure to our search, but we're trying to learn a kind of understanding that's less words, that's more intuitive, that's more felt, that's more understood non-conceptually. We're trying to learn a second language. It's one that, we spoke as a child, so we can get it back. But it's a whole different way of seeing the world. I remember one time I was, during the pandemic, I was on retreat and I was walking near a salt marsh. And there was this class studying outside. I thought this was great. And as I walked by, this little boy went up to his teacher. He must have been, 7, 8 maybe. And he seemed a little confused, like, what do I do now? And she seemed confused too. She's like, here, take this ruler and this piece of paper and just go measure something, she says to him. And I was kind of heartbroken, because what I wanted her to say to the little boy is, go sit next to the marsh and hear and smell and see and feel your animal body sitting there, and then come back to me and tell me what you learned. So the first way is really the way our whole society leans. And the second way is the way of the mystics. It's also the way of most of human history, about 99%, until us postmodern folks showed up and worship the ways of the mind, forget about the heart and the body. So we're trying to reclaim something that we do know, as you all described, and as we find our hearts migrating towards. Pretending not to know what I was eating revealed new sensations, sweetness and finish compared to the knowing taste. Exactly, yes, again, the receptivity allows us to get closer to the way things are, which I think is related then to the next question too. I'm new and missed the term you used, impermanence, dukkha, not self. What is those terms? So yes, when we're receptive, first of all, the changing nature of life becomes much more obvious. Active mindfulness fixates, receptive mindfulness unfreezes life, as you all pointed out in many kind of different ways. The second word, dukkha, which is hard to translate, which is why I didn't translate it, but it could be translated as suffering or stress. And dukkha is basically pointing towards the unreliability of phenomena and the inability of phenomena to provide the lasting happiness that we're looking for. So dukkha could include all of our tendencies to try to make pleasant things stay, get rid of unpleasant things, all the micromanaging, which is the stress, to try to make life be the way we want it to be. And when we see kind of how things change, when we let ourselves be touched by life and see how things change, we see that that tendency causes stress. It's not that we never go for what we want or try to improve unpleasant circumstances. No, we do all that. But what we see in meditation is how we're doing that moment by moment by moment by moment, and it's stressful. And that maybe there's another way we can find to be happy, which has something to do with some of the words that you guys mentioned, like freedom, expansion, relaxation, not judging, settling back. So all that's in the word dukkha, which is why it's hard to translate. So we have impermanence, dukkha, and then not self, which again, we could spend a lot of time talking about that. I guess what you could say with receptive mindfulness is that not self shows us the interconnected, somebody wrote that, the interconnected nature of our relationship with the environment, which shows that it's a fallacy to think that we can separate ourselves out and be invulnerable and be independent of the world around us. So self is this separating tendency, the tendency to try to protect this being and to have it be independent. But that's not the nature of this world. The nature of this world is flow. Your senses, our senses, every moment are portals to the rest of the world. So we're always, through the sense experience, being interconnected with the world. We can't make ourselves separate. So that's one way you can understand that self. There's many ways we can talk about it. But with this receptive mindfulness, we start to see the kind of permeability of self that we take to be separate. That's not self. The permeability, the interconnectedness, the changing, fluid nature of what we call ourselves. And so all of this becomes more apparent when we receive the sense experiences. And all of that can be more hidden when the mindfulness is, you could say, too active. It's when it's too directive, we can hide all of those other experiences, can be hidden. The impermanence, dukkha, and not self. Kind of the three things that we're supposed to really understand deeply to free the heart and mind, right? That these are doorways into freedom. Impermanence is a doorway into freedom. Dukkha is a doorway into freedom. Not self is a doorway into freedom. Ways that we can see the true nature of life and work out that letting go or letting be is the only way to free the mind and the heart. Again, that doesn't mean that we're going to get totally passive and never, try to improve our lives. Of course we do, but it's a lot. We're talking about this moment by moment relationship to the world. What we're trying to really learn is how to be a little bit lighter, really. That's one way. If you want to see if your practice is working, just ask yourself, am I a little bit lighter than I used to be? That means you're going in a good direction. If you're getting a little bit more uptight, better check how you're practicing. Might be something about how you're practicing that's not helping you. But if we find that we can go more with this flowing, changing world without having to control it quite so much. Of course, we still have our issues. We're human, but if there's a little bit more kind of flexibility and ease with life, it's a good direction. Here's a fun story that I've been reading some lately. It's from Ed Brown, a Zen teacher. He says, when I was a cook at Tassajara back in the 60s, when we were just starting up Tassajara, so this is a Zen center in California, most of you probably know that, we were sitting in our temporary zendo and began having meals together in the zendo for the first time. Before that, we had family-style meals at a table. At the family-style breakfast, we would serve hot cereal and put out white sugar, brown sugar, and honey because some people didn't want to be eating sugar. Sugar is bad for you. There were a lot of students practicing Zen macrobiotics. It's too yin, they would say. There were also people who didn't like honey, so we served molasses. You wouldn't want to deny anybody what they wanted. Everybody should have what he wants, right? That's the American way. Have it your way, the way you want it to be. So he talked about then how they started to do this Zen way where you you pass the condiments along while people are serving themselves. And he said the problem was if you put like all these choices for each person and then it had to go all the way down the line, they wouldn't get through their meal. It would take forever. So he said they wound up having, we found that what we wanted to have was one set of condiments for every 3 people. If there were 45 people in the meditation hall, there were 15 sets of condiments and about 8 different dishes for each of the different condiments. We're talking about 120 or so little dishes. After breakfast, do we want to put those things away and clean all the dishes, or do we want to leave them out, put plastic wrap over them? He said after the second or third morning we had done this, somebody came out to those of us serving the meal and said, Suzuki Roshi would like to give a lecture. Please come into the meditation hall before you go to the kitchen to clean up and have your own breakfast. Suzuki Roshi said, I don't really understand you Americans. When you put so much milk and sugar on your cereal, how will you taste the true spirit of the grain? Why don't you taste the true nature of each moment instead of trying to make everything taste just the way you want it to? Why don't you taste your own true spirit? What, did you think you could add milk and sugar to each moment of your life to make it taste the way you want? I find that very delightful. This is a Buddhist truth. There's no way to get moment after moment according to your taste. It's not your fault. It can't be done. It's not because of your lack of skill or lack of trying or lack of savvy or competence or your lack of self-esteem. It's not your fault that you can't get this moment or the next moment to be to your liking. That's the first noble truth. It can't be done. Not even enlightenment will help you have everything according to your taste. So go ahead and taste the truth of the moment, the true spirit of the grain, the true nature of sadness or sorrow, the true nature of grief, the true nature of being, the true nature of joy, of pleasure, of happiness, of delight, of love. Go ahead and taste it and let the taste come home to your heart and digest it. To me, that's very much about this kind of receptive mindfulness, accepting the taste of this moment, the true nature of it, and letting ourselves be touched by it. Let's see. Let's take a minute. I can talk more, but just want to see if there's any questions, anything of what I've said so far that you might wonder about, want to hear more about. You can either raise your hand or put it in the chat. Oh, there are my papers. My papers fell. I feel like we've just been digesting a lot. Let's just take a couple of minutes to just sit in silence, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then see if anything pops up. Nothing you have to go looking for. Just letting ourselves, what stands out from what I said so far? What seems helpful for you? What would you like to experiment with more? Because that's the real reason for these talks, right? Is something resonates and it supports your practice. How might anything that resonated for you be integrated into your life or your practice? Maybe you'll have your morning cereal without condiments. So we can open our eyes when we feel ready. I'm going to see if there's anything in my notes that I wrote down that I didn't get to that I want to. So I've said a lot of what I wanted to say. Anything come up that you wanted to hear more about? Let's see here. I love the idea of the true nature of the moment. Maybe a 15-minute meditation on that. Maybe. Did somebody, Kason, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Yeah, I just had a quick question. You've made a great case for receptive mindfulness, and I'm wondering, is there ever a good case for active mindfulness, or should we abandon that entirely and only practice receptive mindfulness?
Yeah, I think there's a good case for active mindfulness when some experience is overwhelming us, and we need to actually manage it. So it might be an emotion is overwhelming and carrying us away, or a body sensation is super painful, and we just don't have the capacity in the moment to open to it. We actually need to think about managing it. So if it's a pain in the body, we need to think about techniques. Maybe I'll touch the edge of the pain and then move my attention somewhere else and then come back and touch the edges. That's all very active. We're doing something, but it's appropriate in that circumstance, because we can't. Also, if we're very scattered, maybe keeping coming back to the breath, which is an active movement of the mind, is helpful. And like I said, especially early in practice, but for all of us, sometimes it's going to be good to be kind of active and doing something. So on another level, we're right more in the technicalities of meditation. There's what's called, like I said, aiming and sustaining. So sometimes you move towards something, you just don't want to forget the connecting part. So you connect and then receive. You don't want to forget the receiving part, because the way I describe it, sometimes we Westerners are we're kind of like woodpeckers. We go for it, we go for it, we go for it, we go for it, right? It's kind of we keep pounding at our meditation subject sometimes, the breath, the breath, the breath, right? And it's that aiming. Or sometimes I say we're like blue jays, kind of bossy, right? If you watch blue jays, they like to boss and dominate. We're kind of bossy with our being, and all of that has this kind of active element to it. And I sometimes say to people, well, we should be a little bit more like wood thrushes. If you know what a wood thrush sounds like, I probably can't play it because it probably won't work right. Play it afterwards. A wood thrush is this nondescript bird that hangs out in the woods, and their song it's lyrical and light. It's like a flute. It touches your heart. It's kind of has this nostalgic beauty to it. And I think of that as more the receptive mindfulness, right? So sometimes, we need to be more like wood thrushes and less like woodpeckers. We keep aiming, but what about receiving and relaxing? So they both definitely have their place, but the deepest wisdom comes out of receptivity. Because receptivity is right next to letting go, isn't it? It's really closely related. It's also the non-conceptual realm. I say sometimes that the unconditioned, or nibbana, is wholly receptive, you could say, are wholly in this more non-conceptual, unknowing, receptive mode.
Yeah, thanks so much. That helps a lot.
Good, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if you can see my hand because it's.
That's oh, please go ahead, Irene.
Yeah. So it has been my goal to practice in this way for a long time. And it reminds me a lot of Sayadaw U Tejaniya's teaching of just being aware all the time. And I did a retreat with him where I felt like my head was going to explode because it was so difficult for me. I mean, because of my particular history and conditioning, you know, my mind, I have a very controlling mind that feels like it needs to be on high alert all the time. And so, so how I usually practice is like in formal meditation, I'll spend some period of time, you know, just staying on the breath, and then I'll try to venture out into a more receptive awareness and then come back to my, you know, the way you were instructing in the meditation, you know, coming back to my object. But one thing that I've found with the receptive awareness is that it's easier to fool myself that I'm being mindful because there's no like if I'm on the breath, I know when I'm off the breath, but when I'm practicing receptive awareness, it's harder to tell when I just like lost. So
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you have anything to say about that.
Yes, that's true. I mean, that's it. Yeah, I mean, the thing about too much receptive without enough active is it can kind of go into space out, right? Into almost too much relaxation. And then if you notice that's happening, you could bring in some intentionality, a little bit more intentionality to try to balance, right, and be more present. I know the U Tejaniya style doesn't do that. I was trained in the Mahasi style, and the U Tejaniya style is actually a reaction to the Mahasi style. So the Mahasi style is very a lot of aiming. And you know, that's how, you know, lineages evolve. They react to the previous one, right? So U Tejaniya is called, you know, not, you know, you don't aim at all basically, or you don't direct very much what's happening. And so they both have their downsides and they both have their strong suits. And so it's always good to know whatever technique you're doing, you know, what's the strong suit and what's the downside. Every technique. And so with the receptive, right, it can get a little bit too loose. And then maybe you would connect with the breath, but then can you aim for the breath and then can you receive the breath? You know, so there's, again, if you're going to follow Tejaniya, you could ask him whoever it's teaching you in that style, the answer to the question if you want to stay in that, you know, style. But I think it's okay to, bring in some intentionality. But the truth is, we can also practice kind of unconditional acceptance of whatever's happening, even if that's spacing out. Like I love to practice. My teacher was so good at teaching me this, to not have a preference for not thinking, overthinking. In other words, to not be bothered by thinking. It's a great practice to not be bothered by your thinking mind. It's like, oh, it's just thinking. This is human thinking. To receive thinking mind, busy thinking mind as human mind in this moment. So that's the you can take the receptive a long ways towards being okay with spacing out. What's wrong with spacing out? I mean, on one level, sometimes spacing out is really helpful. We need it. Like we space out so we can survive. Reality is really intense. It is. Being here is intense when you really get down to it. And so we all need thought vacations. We all need to space out. Like that's all right. That's human. So that's kind of the way I go these days, even though see, that's just one side. The other side is, yeah, we are trying to wake up and be here, and we do bring in techniques that help us do this, but maybe we try too hard to get it right. Maybe there's a lot of freedom in just not worrying about getting it right. About letting the room in our hearts expand enough to include thinking and spacing out, anger, all those things we think aren't supposed to be happening. So I went a few directions, but I hope it was helpful. We try so hard, don't we? Hmm. And yet, sometimes trying too hard is really helpful for a period of time. So trying too hard is okay. I tried really hard for the first years of my practice, and it was useful. It kind of cracked me open a little bit. I was pretty tough cookie, pretty wound up. And boy, I had a hard shell, very hard shell. And so a little bit of trying too hard, yeah, helped out. Just, real emphasis on being here. I also have a lot of space for the need to protect our hearts. I appreciate our defenses and try to relate to them with kindness and softness. They helped us survive. They don't want to be exiled. Thanks a lot for all your help. Get out of here. No, it's okay. Yeah, unconditional. Anything else today? Let's see here. There's one that I haven't seen, I think. Oh, Donna for Rebecca. I guess I didn't need to see that one. We don't need to go for a full 2 hours, so we can just see if there's any last thoughts. I'll see if there's any last thoughts on my side. Maybe I'll share one more story. Did anybody else have a question while I was looking down? No. Yeah, one more. Yes, Diane.
Yeah, Irene's question raised a question in my mind, and I've always been trying to figure out how sleep figures into the practice. And I'm wondering if receptive mindfulness is related at all to the sleep state. Maybe not the deep sleep state, I don't know, or possibly the dream state. I mean, something clearly is going on there. And yeah, I don't know how to articulate the question very well, but I wonder if you have anything to say about that.
I mean, there's certainly a letting go when we go to sleep, right? Like, it's great letting go practice. You can't go to sleep if you're hanging on. Well, you can, I suppose, but it's not as easy, right? So there is kind of this letting go and things happening in the mind of over which we don't have the same kind of control, right? As when we're awake, and then shows up in dreams. Yeah. So it is a, kind of a way and a place that sometimes all those parts we try to manage come out of their little cages, right? And show up in dreams. That's the only thought that comes to me, kind of related to the topic. Mhm. So here's a story from Sharon Salzberg's latest book, Real Life. And she was talking about times she was traveling in Texas with Joseph Goldstein. Joseph struck up a conversation with the young man working behind the counter. After a few minutes, he told Joseph that he'd never left Houston and went on to describe, somewhat passionately, how his dream was to one day go to Wyoming. When Joseph asked him what he thought he would find there, he responded, open, expansive space, a feeling of being unconfined, with peacefulness and freedom and room to move. Joseph responded, there's an inner Wyoming too, At that point, the young man fixed a stare at Joseph and said, that's freaky, as he sidled away. We don't think that's freaky, do we? In some ways, that's what we're cultivating, our own inner Wyoming, that expansive space within our own hearts and our own minds, that unconfined with room to move, right? Room to move and respond appropriately with compassion and wisdom. It's so lovely to be with you all today. This topic of active and receptive mindfulness is woven throughout my book. It's a central part of it. So if you want more in November, there'll be the opportunity to buy the book and read more about it. So, Kason, I don't know if you say anything at the end or if
No, it looks like Sarah has a question.
Sarah.
But otherwise, you can just take us out with the dedication or however you like.
Okay, but Sarah, please go ahead.
Thank you. I was a little bit hesitant to ask this question, but what if during your meditation with receptive mindfulness, you feel the energy or the sensation that you want to move?
Mm.
You want to move and feel your body. Would that be something good, helpful? Because you are creating more sensation or stimuli in your body. So you have the concentration to, to have that insight or to have the meditation.
What's the motivation to move? Do you know why you want to move?
I don't know, maybe to calm your nervous system or just some kind of, not because you are agitated or to want to finish your meditation, just because you feel like in receptive mindfulness, you feel sensations and something beautiful, maybe in your awareness or in your experience. So what if you want to move?
Yeah. So again, I would say there's pros and cons to moving. So the pro might be really, like you said, kind of receptive to what your body wants in that moment and to feel it. The reason not to move might be to see if there's some kind of hidden reason to want to move that isn't immediately apparent to you, but will become apparent to you if you don't move. And if we're being controlled or motivated by something, we want to know that, because that's not freedom, right? Probably some form of aversion or wanting would be the most likely culprits, right? Let's see. So that's the benefit of not moving, is to see that. And the benefit of moving is to go with what is presenting. I would definitely at least do sometimes where you didn't move, you know.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And there, you know, there's something about, right, an active choice there. So definitely that comes up, you know, not moving is actually kind of making an action, right? To stay still, but there's benefits to it. So again, it's both and. Why don't we just sit for a minute? So we're closing out our morning. And again, I always like to just mention, if there's anything that resonated, you can bookmark it. You can let the rest go. Don't have to worry about remembering it all. What resonates is what's the teaching for us right now. And then wishing that our practice brings peace to our hearts and minds. That it also brings peace to all whom we contact in our world. And then spreading out further, that our practice brings peace to all beings in this world.